I think I'm just stressing about the fact that I don't have control over it.
Big leather chair in the middle of the
God,
room.
We're just going straight to the room. Oh my God.
I sat in the chair. I sat
That
in the
was
chair.
so
I'm sorry. but I did.
like gravity. You turn it on, it's just straight corn the whole time.
It's a fair point. I know. I will say that like through just even these first few episodes, we've learned so much. It's completely changed our view of surrogacy, adoption, foster to adopt, all of these different paths to parenthood.
Which is actually kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it is. We're
We-
going to talk about like, I guess, what has changed,
Where we're at.
and like what we're thinking now with
Mhm.
surrogacy and all that. So
With that, welcome to the Who's Your Daddy podcast, where we talk about starting a family through non-traditional means. We are your hosts and husbands, Michael and Matt, and today we're talking about where we're at. What changed? What are
changed?
our thoughts? Where are our heads at like a year and a half into this whole thing?
I don't want to say like where we're at, but maybe like where we're going, because I don't feel like we've arrived anywhere.
Oh, there's what's funny is like, yeah, we haven't really made much progress since like, I don't know, when was that? September, October of last year?
Right, but
Like,
I
nothing's
think
really
our minds have changed. We've really developed our thinking on this and have figured things out and have maybe taken a more active role
Mhm.
in the surrogacy process than we like previously thought that we were going to. So I like want to focus this episode on just how our viewpoints have changed since starting the process of surrogacy. And these are kind of like the things that I wish I would have known in the conversations. I wish we had this conversation before we even started surrogacy, because it would have changed a lot of like what we did and how we pursued things.
Well, I think part of it is like,
It just would have better prepared us.
we kind of got halfway through the process and then we started getting a lot of questions and people were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And so as I am a podcast listener, I was like, this would be great to talk about on a podcast. It'd be so informative. We could really like hash out some stories. And then as we started interviewing people who have done this and have gone through surrogacy, adoption, IVF, foster, we just learned a lot. And so we've had multiple people that we've talked to since starting the podcast. And I just feel like a lot has changed in our minds since we started doing that, because we started asking a lot of people a lot of questions for a long time.
Yeah.
Which ideally we would have done before we started everything, you know, but like who thinks about like, oh my gosh, I need to call this person for an hour and just grill them, you know, like who has that time?
And what questions are you going to grill them with? Because like you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
And I think a lot of the last couple months have been figuring out just what we don't know and how to learn those things.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Matthew.
What a month has it been?
It's over. Pride Month's over. I
It's
don't get
cancer
it. June
season.
was like dunsies.
It's your season.
It's my season.
It's your birthday.
Yay!
Happy
Yeah, I know
birthday.
it's my birthday. Really, really. Is it like a day or two after the
Can you believe it?
day after this will be released?
Feels like just yesterday it was Grimace's birthday.
I
And now
hope-
it's yours.
I hope social media goes as bonkers for my birthday as they did for Grimace's.
Oh, highly doubtful. Social
If you-
media hasn't gone bonkers for anything more than Grimace's birthday.
If you don't know what we're talking about,
The big purple blob.
there's definitely a small sector of
Small.
TikTok. I didn't realize like that was a common thing until you like unearthed it.
I actually think that most of TikTok is just now Grimace videos.
It's just but you can't even get the shake anymore.
No, I know. It's really frustrating. I'm sad. We drove to a McDonald's trying to find the Grimace shake, and then we
no.
realized that it's gone.
Matthew wanted to recreate one of the videos,
Because
but we missed out by like a week.
if you haven't seen it, the TikTok videos, they're hilarious. They're people that are trying the Grimace shakes, and then they're like putting a horror film twist on it. It's so unexpected.
Mhm.
People will chug the Grimace shake, and then they will turn into zombies and start like spitting up the purple nonsense all over their shirts. And it's just
It's
a
so
trend
bad.
going around where it's just going to people passed out with Grimace shake down their shirt.
Oh my God. I saw somebody do it at an actual McDonald's and I was like, hopefully they're
Like on
boss
video
doesn't
or in
see it.
person?
Yeah. No, like I mean they
Oh, I was
were
thinking.
videoing like inside of it,
I thought you
like
were.
after they closed.
I thought you were like actually at the McDonald's they were filming at, and I
No,
was like,
no.
whoa, what would you do?
Oh my god, that would be hilarious. I'd probably join in. Be like, tag me.
Anyway, other than Grimace's birthday and your birthday,
Yeah,
also important.
very important.
One of the most surprising things this last month has just been. I'm not even. It's not been surprising. It's been unexpected.
Okay.
Releasing the podcast and like going into full on podcast producer mode has been insane.
It is a lot of work,
But it's been amazing too.
but someone was texting me yesterday, and I was like, it is so much work, but I like actually enjoy it. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like actually kind of fun. I think just
I
sitting down
agree.
and talking and chatting and releasing like 45 minutes to an hour of just talking to people, interviewing people. I was saying too, we have friends that we like have interviewed that we've never just sat down and talked to them for like an hour straight, like super in depth. And then we got the chance to do it on here.
And how much we've learned from them and just those
Yeah.
like conversations.
So I broke this down into like a few
Different
categories.
sections.
So I would say like what our thoughts were about the location at the beginning and where we're at now.
Location of what?
Location of our clinic, of our surrogate, of our
everything.
agency,
Got it.
of our everything.
Okay.
Second, we're going to talk a little bit about just our IVF experience. We haven't
Second
really
category. Right. We haven't
dove into that yet.
No.
So kind of the emotional part of that and
Yeah.
not just the like TikTok-y part of it.
Okay.
Investment. So like 1, time, and 2, money. So just the investment of all of it and how we feel. And then the last one is going to dive into a little bit of the support system that we've set up and kind of our thoughts on it. So our clinic, our agency, and kind of go from there on our thoughts and what we've learned from other people. And that's what I've decided today that
I love
we're
that.
going to dive into.
And I think I'll add one more section.
What?
On top of that? Just what has changed for us and like our participation in the process. 5th category. Yeah. I have some thoughts on that.
Okay,
And we
I'll
can
allow
expand
it.
on it. Yeah. I also want to add just that, like, since launching this podcast, so many conversations have sprung up because of it. Just
It's
people
been so cool, yeah.
within our circles and outside our circles, people who I've never talked to before, and I've just received messages from either through DMs or email or just Instagram comments, etc. Like, oh my God, there's so much to talk about with surrogacy, adoption, IVF, and all of this. And I thought that this was like an area that, you know, we needed more conversation about and more discussion and more education, but I didn't realize just how excited people would be to like discuss it.
Or engage, yeah.
Or engage. And I just really appreciate like all of the feedback that we've gotten about this podcast and the topics that we're covering. I don't know, I can't.
Speaking of, if you have anything to contribute, you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also leave us a rating.
Love
We love
that.
that. So
Really helps us out a lot and it helps us reach the right people.
Yeah, and I haven't had too much time to dive into like all of the reviews yet, but actually we need to do that and see if there's like questions.
I've looked at the
and
reviews a little
everything.
bit, and it's been surprising because it's like really positive stuff and paragraphs.
Yes.
People are leaving paragraphs.
I love that.
It is so different from what I usually see on TikTok and Instagram, etc. Because like typically I see an emoji or a cool, awesome, love it, or spam. And like, this is I just like I am kind of new to the podcast world in general, and entering into it, I can see why this is so appealing because you get to know people on such a deeper level, and I just really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So that being said, let's get into your first topic.
Okay. So we talked about this probably, I don't remember exactly what we said, but we talked about this a little bit on a different episode and on social media about like how we chose where we chose.
Right.
Because currently we had IVF. We did IVF in Texas through a clinic.
Our embryos are in Texas.
And an agency that we signed with is also in Texas. And we had spoken to agencies on the West Coast and Texas, and I don't remember where else, but I think that's kind of where we focused.
Like Oregon, Washington, California were the main ones, and then there was
Yeah.
like a few maybe spotted around the country.
Yeah. And I don't know, we just had a good feeling about it, and maybe we still will. But I think as time's gone on, just thinking about like having things done that far away, I think is we've sort of changed our mind a little bit on. We were feeling very positively about doing this process in another state. And I think it's because a lot of people that we've seen stories of, for some reason, they always have things done in other states.
Yeah, no, most
I,
of the people that we know have done surrogacy and IVF in like other
so I
states,
know
and
like
so it was just
New
something that I knew.
Yorkers who have done
Yeah,
it in
we saw it.
Oregon.
Hmm.
I know
And you see people all the time going from other countries and doing it in places like Oregon.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm like, okay, I know I'm in Oregon. One of the biggest thoughts that we had was that with so many people coming from other states and other countries to do the process here in Oregon or just on the West Coast, like we thought there'd be a lot more competition to
Mhm.
find a gestational carrier or a surrogate.
Mhm.
So that was like one of the big implications of like, oh, we should go look somewhere else
Right.
because we don't I don't know. I didn't want to compete
Mhm.
to find a surrogate or gestational carrier.
Right. And so that was sort of our thought process there. And like I knew people in Illinois who did it in California, and people in New York who did it in Florida, and people in New York who did it in Oregon. And it just felt like everybody was sort of just like bouncing around, and I wasn't sure why. But then also hearing their stories, I think a lot of their IVF clinics were local, which maybe would
Mm.
have been nice thinking back to it. And I don't know that we necessarily went and did a deep dive into like cost comparison, but I think we thought if we had our agency and our clinic in the same spot that would be like the most convenient. But now I'm sort of like, maybe not, because now we're not even sure. It's
Right.
been so long that we've been waiting to match with a surrogate. Like we're not even sure if our surrogate would be in in Texas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought it would be so much faster having an agency to maybe just even get a call, or like I don't know, something would happen faster. I think they set like I think they set the expectation a little bit, but it just feels like it's been a long time.
A lot of what I'm hearing is I think I thought this, like at the time,
Hmm.
and
And I still could be wrong
I know, but
even now.
I have to say, like at the beginning of it, I had no idea what was right and what was wrong about the process, and I just had inclinations or
Hmm.
feelings and thoughts, and like I we're making some pretty big decisions based off of
Hmm.
those first feelings and thoughts.
I also think something big that happened between then and now is like we signed with, I believe, our agency like maybe spring of 2022.
Right.
And then the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade like that June. And even though
Yeah.
like we knew Texas wasn't a super friendly state, if you had an emergency and you ended up having to terminate a pregnancy, like now it's like really bad.
So
And
how would that
so,
necessarily affect like
well,
the
if you
surrogacy process
I
with
don't
Roe v.
think there's
Wade being overturned?
I don't think there's going to be as many people in Texas willing to be surrogates, knowing that like there is a higher chance of miscarriage when you're doing an embryo transfer than like, you know, getting pregnant through normal heterosexual means. Um, and if they cannot seek care, and doctors are like so unwilling to terminate a pregnancy, even if it's like affecting the mother's life at this point, like they have to be so deathly ill, like on their deathbed, that I think there's going to be like a big pullback of people, one wanting to, I mean, they're probably going to be rethinking just getting pregnant in general, maybe, I don't know, maybe. And then two, like offering to do that for somebody else in a state that like it could kind of be dangerous in. So now I'm like, was
Uh,
this I was worried about that a little bit at the beginning. We've been reassured that like it's not like a big deal. It's not going to affect it. But in the back of
yeah.
my mind, I have that sitting there like, gosh, this just doesn't. If I were a woman and I were in Texas, and I was of the mindset that I'm going to help a gay couple, right? Which means I'm
Right.
like maybe a little bit left leaning, maybe a little bit more liberal politically.
Totally.
I probably want to have the uh, support of like all medical means necessary to like be safe.
Because I was kind of thinking that Roe v. Wade being overturned wouldn't necessarily affect the surrogacy industry
I think it's
because,
100% has to.
well, I just thought that I was like, oh, well, this is, I don't know. It's talking about babies that are already in the womb and the possibility, of getting an abortion. And
Hmm.
I didn't think it would affect the creation of embryos, transferring those embryos to a surrogate. But I didn't think about the trickle down effect of like what that does to people mentally when they're thinking about getting pregnant and
It
how
just
that
makes it more
could,
dangerous.
right, and how that could affect
Yeah.
the supply or availability of people willing to be gestational carriers.
The whole point of like, not the whole point, but like one of the points of Roe and just like reproductive care in general is that like pregnancy is a risk. Like, even if it's perfect, even if you're healthy, like you could be healthy and you can have complications, even if you deliver a full term baby, like, you're not miscarrying or having like, preemie or anything like that. Like,
Hmm.
they're just risks, right? Like, you have pregnancy diabetes, you can be
Gestational diabetes. Yeah.
sorry, yes. You can have gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, high blood pressure. I mean, like, there's so many other things, and I'm not an OBGYN, so I don't know. I just know a few like basic things that like your body changes, things happen.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, and you just are at risk, and it can be obviously pretty uncomfortable for some people, for a lot of people. Um, and I think the fact that like one, it's a risk, and then two, if there are complications, you should be allowed to have a doctor talk you through those without the doctor worrying about who could get sued
a
or
hundred
whose
percent.
license could be
Yeah.
taken away because they're putting your best interest
Without going too far
first.
into it, I want to know if somebody were to get pregnant in the state of Texas, would they be able then to go to a different state to get an abortion?
I know, yeah, but like
But like what a barrier that is.
if you have somebody in the emergency room in Oregon and you're like, sorry,
Oh,
you need to go to
I
Idaho.
didn't even think about that.
Like, you need to go to Idaho, sorry.
Right.
They're not going there because they're healthy. They're going there because like something's
Something's
going
wrong.
wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's
I'm
like,
just like understanding again that didn't cross my mind when thinking about
yeah,
Roe versus Wade getting overturned.
right.
And that this is definitely something that would be thought through for people who want to be
Like, yes,
a
you can go to a
surrogate.
different yes, you can go to a different state if you find out that you're pregnant and you don't want it.
Right.
But the problem with surrogacy right now in my head is that if you're in a state where you can't get the proper care and you're going to carry someone else's child, you're not going to go in to have you're not just asking to have an abortion because you don't want that child. Like, you totally chose right to carry that
Right.
child. It's
Hmm.
because
If
there's
there's
a complication
complications.
and like you need emergency care and you need it done now. And I've heard a few stories of, what they've picked up as far as news coverage or articles or even on podcasts, of women, and the doctors are like, you're not sick enough, or like, it's not bad enough, or like there's still I think one of the problems is like there's still a heartbeat. Like, even though they know that the baby's not going to make it, if there's still a heartbeat, like they can't intervene or something
Hmm.
bonkers like that. So it's just so one that's really changed.
Yep.
um, and again, at first we were like, I don't know, maybe it'll still be okay. But in my mind, I don't feel super comfortable like putting someone in that position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And then like we flew to Texas and we did our sperm donations or sperm collection or whatever
Mm-hmm.
and our physical exams and we found a fantastic egg donor in Texas
Mm-hmm.
and we did the donation there and went through all of that. So like we did a big portion of this process in Texas
Mm-hmm.
up until this point. And now I think like where we're thinking about this differently now is like, oh, once the embryo, our future baby, is transferred into a gestational carrier, is that person going to be like all the way across the country in Texas?
Yeah.
And for 8 months, 9 months, as the pregnancy goes through, and we're thinking about like all the appointments that occur and ultrasounds and things like that, and how nice it would
To be a part of it.
be a part of it. And I think the big like deciding factor for us was thinking like, I don't know, we just had this big expectation in our head that if we pursued the process in Oregon, then we were going to have to wait like 3 or 4 years or more to find a gestational carrier, and that it would be 10 times more expensive than it was in Texas, or except like
A little hyperbolic, but
I am
sure.
exaggerating here, but you understand. And in Texas, we're like, this is going to solve all of our problems.
Not all of them. You think.
Again, hyperbolic.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know of like a ton of people doing surrogacy in Texas. I was sort of hopeful that it was sort of a unique state that just happened to have a ton of people, and maybe some people that would be willing. And maybe that's still true. Again, maybe it's still true. It's been a long time. We haven't really heard many people being interested in being a surrogate in Texas. And so I think and obviously what we just talked about is kind of like in the back of our heads of like, do we even want this person to be in Texas if we don't know if they will be completely safe?
Well, the biggest thing, like even with some of the stories we've already heard, interviewing people on this podcast, the possibility of birth occurring prematurely or
Mhm.
just kind of all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
unexpectedly, and us wanting to be present for the birth, I think is huge. That's something that's going to be like a no-brainer deciding factor for both of us now, is like thinking about, we want to be able to drive to where our gestational carrier is,
Mm-hmm.
or I mean, get there within a reasonable amount of time if they're to go into labor unexpectedly.
Right.
And the other thing is thinking about just NICU stays and the length of time that can be,
Right.
and needing to be prepared to stay in a different state for weeks or even
Mhm.
months if there's complications.
And that can happen with singletons or twins.
Right. Yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit, but we did go to Texas. We did do our part of our donation.
I want to do a
Um,
whole episode on sperm donation rooms, and
I think we can cover most of it here. I don't think it deserves maybe it's an entire episode.
I find it fascinating.
You had a lot of fun there.
Well, you did too.
How did you find the experience?
Oh God, was this an R-rated podcast now?
No,
Explicit?
it's not an R-rated podcast.
my
We're just
goodness.
making babies.
I know. Okay, well, big leather chair in the middle of the
God,
room.
We're just going straight to the room.
Oh yes, we are. And I found it so strange. I just like have never experienced anything like that before in a medical setting, because it feels so sterile, and then at the same time you have this like old school TV with VHS capability.
It was VHS, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was
It-
there a VHS player? Wait,
Yeah.
I thought it was just a TV.
It was like a VHS TV, like a built-in VHS player in the TV, I think, or it was a separate
Oh,
VHS
no,
player
I
and the
don't
TV
think
on
that
top of
was
it.
like that.
One of those.
Oh
But
my God.
anyway, so they put like one of those pee pads down on they call them a Chex pad down on the on the leather chair to make sure that it can catch any spillage that could occur.
Oh my God.
I sat in the
Who-
chair. I sat
That
in the
was
chair.
so
I'm sorry, but I did
one,
it.
like gravity, and then two, who's sitting? It's awful.
But
Who's sitting down in that chair? So, anyways, the setup beyond what Matthew's described is that there's a giant lazy boy leather chair, chuck pad down, TV in front of you that just is on.
Kind of like blank walls, no windows.
Yeah, on
Fluorescently
straight,
lit.
You turn it on, it's just straight corn the whole time.
Straight corn.
Straight corn.
Straight
And
corn.
straight
Literally
corn.
straight corn.
Straight corn. And then there are like some Playboy
There
magazines.
was also no options on the TV. Once you turn it on, you
No
turn it on.
options.
It's one video
Yeah.
only,
Yeah.
and it is not good.
No bueno.
I turned it on.
And then the rest of the room is like medical, so it's just like those like plain like Formica whatever countertops and like medical cabinetry, and then you have like a little window that you put your sample in when you're
Yep.
done.
Which is really funny because when I put mine in, almost
The other
immediately, it was
side
like
opens.
2 or 3 seconds passed, and the other
It's so
side opened,
weird.
and they grabbed it, and I'm like, "Wow, that was quick."
Oh, that was fast.
Are they listening? Are they waiting for me?
Yeah. But
But I did find that really funny though that you did not sit in the chair and you did not turn on the TV.
no,
And I sat in
No.
the chair and I did turn on the TV,
no,
which I will say did not help me in finishing the process.
no, 100% no.
Because if you think about like, yeah, sitting down in this leather chair and turning on the TV and being like, "Oh, that's straight corn."
No.
I was like, "Nope, nothing's happening here for a while." But yeah, that was funny. 2 adjacent rooms, 2 completely different experiences.
Yeah. That was fun. And then let's see, we came back home, and then our egg donor went in, harvested eggs. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of like that process? Because that was essentially like a giant whirlwind of a week, because it was like
Yeah.
highs and then lows.
Yeah. Egg donation week is a pretty emotional week for many people who go through the process. It is like, I don't know, there's so many expectations and things leading up to it, and it's a lot of buildup. Like we spent months and months and months preparing legally and financially and just going through the step by step. And then once you finally get to the egg donation portion, it's like fingers crossed, and you hope that you get a decent donation. And our egg donor was incredible. She did everything that she was supposed to.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
she did amazingly, flawlessly. And it was really interesting because we actually stayed in contact with our egg donor, which is something that a lot of people do not do. I didn't find that out until like after we interviewed our egg donor. But most people, the majority of
random.
people, it's random.
Or
and
sorry, not random, private?
It's private or anonymous. Yeah. So
Anonymous.
anonymous.
That's the better
anonymous
word.
donation. Right.
It's an anonymous donation.
And so most people don't talk to their egg donor. They don't interview them. They don't get to know them at all.
Mhm.
And all that information's kept secret. But for us, we really wanted to like have, I don't know, an indication of what her personality was like.
Right.
Even though like personality, there's way more that goes into a personality than just genetics, obviously. But like we wanted to just get an idea of like, who is this person that's going to be the genetic mother of our children? And for better or for worse, we were like, okay, let's do the call. Let's meet her. We met in person. She's lovely. She's wonderful. And then we decided to move forward with everything.
We decided to move forward with her before we met her in
Right.
person. We just Zoomed. We did like a Zoom video call, got a really good feeling, and then most egg donations are like closed, right? Like they don't really get updates unless you update the agency, and then the agency gives them the update. You have to like,
Right. So it's going through like a
middleman.
third party or something like that.
But we were able to
Get text updates throughout like the week or 2 of hormone injections.
I'm talking about like when the babies are here. Usually the egg donor
Oh.
doesn't have any sort of communication with the family. If the family gives an update, the family would send like pictures of the babies to the agency, and the agency would pass that on to like the egg donor if they
Right.
wanted to know. We were pretty open. I mean, I think I wanted to be as like open about the process as possible, and I think you did too. Or we were like, well, this is sort of like the genetic tie, the other half of the kids, and so I think it would be useful for them to know this person, and I don't know. I think it'd be nice for us to have some sort of relationship with somebody who's going to give us this gift. So I think we're kind of weird in that sense that we were doing more of like an open, but also we're so public online. Like I don't
Yeah.
even know how it could have been completely closed. It's just like we would we're kind
That
of
did pass through
posting
my
and,
mind, and
like we're
yeah.
talking about this on a podcast and we're posting stuff on TikTok about it and we're and Instagram, and it's just like our lives are sort of an open book already. I think it just lent itself to being like, we would love to know this person. We'd love them to know who we are so that, they can kind of watch this process unfold.
And one piece of commentary that I did hear that struck me and made me kind of like second guess myself or second guess my thoughts on this was that somebody told me, I have no issue with knowing the egg donor or my kids knowing the egg donor, etc. But I didn't want to make that decision for my kids. I wanted them to be able to make the decision of knowing who their genetic mother is, or who it is that's like maternally attached to them in that way. And I found that really interesting, because to think about
I guess I don't fully follow.
like we already made that decision to not be anonymous. So our egg donor knows who we are, we know who our egg donor is,
Yeah.
but like this argument is, is that okay to make that decision for your kids? Because like
You're
essentially
making a decision either way.
essentially what we're doing is we made that decision, but like would our future kids regret that or feel kind of like slighted by it because we
Why?
made that decision for them? They didn't get the chance to say like, no, I don't want to know who my genetic mother is until I'm
They
older
also
or
didn't
something
really
like
get to
that.
choose to be made in a petri dish.
It's a fair point. I know. I'm a Libra.
Nobody gets to choose who their parents are.
I have a habit
You know what I
of,
mean?
yeah, I know, but I just like I second guess myself. I see things from other people's point of view, and I think like maybe that makes sense in some
I think the
sense.
argument is some people want it to be closed, and that's fine. So like if you're an egg donor or you're a sperm donor, especially I think if you're a sperm donor, because you could have multiple, like
Right.
many
Yeah.
children out there, I would assume more than an egg donor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just might be a lot for you to know where everyone is, or you
Totally.
know what I mean,
Yeah.
and like to have a relationship, to try and like open things up so that you know where all of your genetic ties are in the world. And I can see where that would be overwhelming. Our egg donor, we said we were open to either. They were hopeful for an open,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so I was like, I totally get that, like you're giving of yourself, and I think it's a good idea. I understand where like the emotion of wanting to know how that process ended up, and like
Yeah.
seeing
Absolutely.
yourself reflected in the world. And who knows if this might be the only time that she does that, because we went the first time egg donor. Um, so I think the argument is like some people don't want to do a closed sperm donor or a
Mm-hmm.
closed egg donor because they want their kids to have the option when they're older.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do that, then they're like, oh, this one's open, but they have to wait till they're 18. We just like skipped the process
Yeah.
to they know them now.
So obviously there's many ways to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's good arguments on both
Yeah.
sides, and there's a lot of different reasons to do it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean like, yeah, it's neither here or there.
I can play devil's advocate for anybody.
Of course you can. Thank you. Love that. So
But
what happened with the eggs?
the emotions of the week, and obviously this plays out on both sides. The person who's going through all of this insane medical procedures and hormones and everything,
The injections, all of
and
that.
then the people on the other side who are essentially just waiting, for
And getting short updates here and there.
for results and hoping that things are going well.
It's a lot of time and financial like investment and emotional investment
Right.
through like up until that point. And then it's a very intense week while you're receiving little bits and pieces of information.
We found out that, I mean, at first it was like amazing news. It was like, we have 30 eggs. We harvested 30 eggs. And I was like, oh my gosh, perfect. Like, we knew of somebody else who had got 30 eggs and they had like an amazing outcome. So I was like, oh, sweet. We're hitting the same markers, the same numbers. This is going to be great. And then I don't remember how long it takes, but then you find out how many are mature. So we did a lot. This whole process, you end up with a lot of cut downs. So we had 30 down to 20. So we split those 10 and 10, half fertilized with Matthew's sperm, half fertilized with mine. It came back, and you found out that you had
7.
that fertilized.
Right.
And they came back to me and said that I only had 1.
Yeah.
And so this all happened within like 72 hours, I think, or something short like that, like a few days.
Right.
Where,
It was the emotional high of hearing like, oh, we have 30 eggs. And
Yeah.
then the next day realizing
okay, we have 20.
20.
And then the next day,
Realizing,
oh, we have like 6 or 7, but only 1 of yours.
Michael's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so only 1 of them fertilized. And then as they develop, then you usually lose more. So I'm in this like state of just like panic because obviously this is super expensive.
Yeah.
And we could have gone through this whole process. We could have flown to Texas. We could have signed all these contracts. We could have spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars to end up with like nothing. Like I might have nothing.
Or just like I don't know. For me, is the emotional impact of the unknown of like not knowing what necessarily went wrong, or like even if we were to redo this process
it's
all
so
over again, would
confusing.
it be the same result? And just like, okay, well, we have these 6 or 7 embryos of mine, and then, or well, blastocysts at this point, and then the 1 of yours, and like, what if we went and did the whole process again? Like, would it be with the same egg donor or a different egg donor?
Mhm.
And then like, would our children be related at all? Or would it be completely like separate fathers and mothers genetically? And just kind of like trying to piece together
Right.
this mental picture of what the process was now going to look like for both of us, with the prospect of like not having any viable embryos from Michael's end.
Right. So you hear that on like day 1, I think, of like how many fertilized. And then you get an update on day 3 and day 5, if I'm remembering correctly.
That's correct.
Day 3, they were all still developing, I think.
I was down to 5 total.
Yeah. And then
Year 1
my 1
was still on
was
there.
hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to day 5 or the end, and all of them had developed.
Yep.
To that, or mine had developed to that point,
And all 5 of mine had developed.
So we made it to blastocyst stage, but then we have one more hurdle to go through because now we're going to do the PGT testing, PGA testing. We can't figure out which one it is.
This is like a genetic testing that they do,
Yeah.
basically just to look at, I think what they do is they
Chromosomes.
take chromosomes. Yeah, they take a sample of the placental layer of the embryo, and then it's a small sample, just like a little smattering of cells.
I think it's like literally like 1 or 2 cells. I don't even know.
Maybe 6 cells, something like that.
Like how many cells are there even at this point?
We could be off on that number. Who knows? It's a bit of cells with a micropipette or whatever. And then they look at those cells and they see if they're, I think what they're looking at is the number of chromosomes.
Essentially, they're looking at, I think, a number of things. They're looking at the complement of chromosomes, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
They can check for Down syndrome, right? So they can check for trisomy 21. They can check for probably like Klinefelters, anything that's like an XXY sort
But
of
essentially,
thing.
they're just looking to see if there's the correct
Turner's,
number of
maybe.
chromosomes. And then they kind of like make a percentage of how many cells have the correct number of chromosomes versus incorrect number of chromosomes. They're able to see which chromosome is like if which chromosome number is extra or missing, and then they basically give you a report and say like, here's your percentages of viability based off of like these numbers. So you're looking at the embryo, the embryo's placental layer, and you're making a judgment saying this placental layer is abnormal with these chromosomes, therefore it most likely will not make it to viability or to be able to birth a child, because it will most likely spontaneously miscarry.
They also grade the embryos like based on looks. They called it like a pageant, like a beauty pageant. Like, does this one look normal? And then they give it like a grade, like ABC or whatever.
Yeah.
And
That doesn't really like, I don't know.
they're like, it's not the biggest determining factor, but like
Can be
it's
percentage
something that we
based, you know,
can like
something that you can
kind of
look
look
at to
at.
see if it gives you an idea of whether or not
Yeah.
the embryo will make it or not.
So we find out after PGT testing that you have 4
Yep.
that passed.
4 of mine
relatively normal.
passed. One of my 5 was abnormal, meaning that it most likely would not make it to birth. Therefore, we would not continue with that one embryo.
And then the other ones have like a little like smattering of beauty pageant grades, but
Yeah,
all
right.
good on
Mhm.
all like implantable
Yep.
or transferable, however you
Totally.
want to say that. My one came back and they said that it had low level mosaicism, which I was like, what in the heck does that mean? So we got on a call with like the genetic testing lab or something, or geneticist, and they sort of walked us through it. Essentially, it just means that it could have a lower probability of
Mhm.
like carrying to full term, maybe like a slightly higher percentage of miscarriage. But if everything goes well, then like totally normal baby.
Yeah.
Like almost 100% normal baby. So I don't know. I think it was just that part has just been the biggest emotional hurdle, because now you have to also then implant that embryo. The embryo has to take, the embryo has to not miscarry and carry to a full term.
And basically just looking at all these odds of
It just has to make it through all these separate little like hurdles that it feels like the odds are very against us or against it. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. It was the one, and it was the one that made it through, and it
Right.
like technically passed everything. So it's like, I don't know. Maybe this could be, maybe it could, just like pass all the hurdles, go through all the things.
We really have very little control over all of it. And it's just
Mhm.
kind of like sitting back and waiting and hoping and fingers crossed that things go well.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at on the egg donation of all of it.
Yeah, it's still just like stressful because it's always in the back of your mind. And it also leads into essentially the next category, right? Which is just like
Mhm.
an investment. And it's such an investment of time and money. We've already looked into whether or not we could do another cycle.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know. It just feels so it feels unfair to get one embryo and then to go and ask what the cost could be for another cycle. And I'm not remembering if we included the egg donor compensation in it or not, but I think it's like $18,000 to $20,000 just to do another cycle with all of the medications and the
The
fee
medications would be additional to that, I believe.
and XYZ.
Yeah.
And it's like that's like, I don't know. At
'Cause
first we were like, I was thinking, well, that's like almost an entire agency fee for an adoption. And it's like, is it worth it to go? I mean,
I
what do you
think when
do?
when we were looking at it, it would be around $30,000 total.
Right.
I think that's including the medications, the hormones, etc., that you have to pay for. Um, and so I think when we're thinking about that, it's kind of like, okay, we already have one of yours
Right.
that can make it. We have 4 of mine that can make it. Is it really? I mean, like, we're not made of money.
Right.
I'm not gonna like invest another $30,000 when we have the option or possibility of birthing a child with what we already have.
Totally. And
And that's what it came down to, was like, even though the odds are not necessarily the odds are kind of against us
Mhm.
as far as like chances go, if both Michael and I were to have a baby of our own. However, like, there's still a chance.
Mhm.
So why not pursue that avenue, see how that works before we invest a bunch more money
Right.
for a possible maybe.
Yeah. Because I mean, a lot of people end up with 3 or 4 viable embryos, right? And then you'll have failed transfers. And we know people who their first transfer was perfect and it went well, and then their next 3 failed. And we know other people whose first like 2 or 3 transfers failed, and then their fourth one, like on their last embryos they had, took.
Wow.
And it's like this. It's just so.
So we haven't
it's
even tried
you
like
just
one
don't
transfer
even,
yet.
and you just don't even know. You
Yeah.
just don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You can't, and they tell you that. They say like you can't predict biology, you can't control biology.
So I think for us it was like, okay, we're just gonna let go of control over this little
I
aspect.
don't know if I've let go of control. I think I'm just stressing about the fact that I don't have control over it.
But I mean, we're gonna let go of pursuing another egg donation at this time.
At this time,
Just so that we feel more comfortable with the numbers. I mean like it just to make ourselves feel better.
Well, it's not just to make ourselves feel better. It's we just don't have it in the bank.
Well, yeah.
And we need that, for like the rest of the process.
Right.
Which, I mean, I think the other thing is when we sat down and we were looking at everything, and we find out that we're like somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000 already invested in this process, and we have 5 embryos, and like, yes, it's a big part of the process, but it's sort of like that's all we have. I don't know. In my like twisted, I don't know, maybe pessimistic mind, I'm like, all we have is like 5 embryos, sitting and waiting, and that cost us like that much money, and there's still so many still so many steps to go through.
And maybe in my optimistic side, if I could play devil's advocate.
Yeah, please.
We have 5 embryos.
No, I know.
We could have 5 children from that. That's amazing. Don't you want 5 kids running around right now?
I think this whole process is just stressful. And I think all these processes are stressful. And if we could go, but at the same time, it's like if we could go through another egg donation process and another fertilization process, and it costs a couple $1,000s, like under 10, I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? Like we should definitely do that. But it's just like we still have to pay like a surrogate and a lawyer and for health insurance and for like children when they arrive.
Yeah.
And just it's overwhelming, I think, from the what is that called? Pragmatic side of things. I'm learning that a lot of people have taken out loans just to do this process. That is not something that I would like to do. I'd like to try and get through this process without having to do that.
Yeah.
Or having to dip into retirement or anything like, I don't know, just more
I think we'll
financially
be
burdensome.
very fortunate if we don't have to take out loans or dip into retirement. That'll be I'll feel pretty fortunate if we get through the process without doing that, because I know that's not necessarily the norm.
Right.
So, no, we'd be very lucky.
And I think, that.
And it's not like people plan on taking out loans going through the process. It's just that complications occur and things come up and you have to redo the egg donation cycle and you have to redo transfers, things like that. So like, yeah.
Yeah, you do. And that's, and there's a lot of times where that happens where you like, it costs thousands of dollars just for a transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's also something that we have to think about. Like if the first one fails, it costs more money to do another one. There's no guarantees.
Well, if we haven't convinced you not to do surrogacy yet, keep on listening. No.
I think it's just that's the time and the investment part. It's just like it's so much time in the back of your head to think about all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
And as we sit here and we wait to match with a surrogate, it's just like, man, I feel like we're gonna need somebody who like is very, very perfect on paper, because it's like you don't want this
and
to
you
go
say
wrong.
Sitting here waiting to match with a surrogate, I feel like now we're taking an active role in finding a surrogate.
Well, we just
and that's
recently
something that's
did.
changed. Yes. And that's next list on the next
the
point.
Next thing on the list is essentially, like this time investment is sort of frustrating a little bit. And a lot of people that we've talked to have sort of done that independently, outside of an agency, like finding their surrogate, interviewing their surrogate. Um, if you do that, it's a cost savings, but it's a lot more legwork on your side of things.
Hmm.
So, but anyways, you can talk maybe a little bit more about how that came to be, or like, I think you're doing most of that.
I think like I didn't really know how much of an active role we could play. I guess point four and point five kind of blend in together then if this is really point four. But like the sense of how much of an active role we could play into finding our surrogate. Because I was simply unaware of the ability to find other people online who I don't know, just like in the independent sense. I thought like most people I thought the vast majority of people went through an agency. I didn't really realize that there was a large percentage of people who actually pursue this process completely independent of
I
an
didn't realize
agency.
that there were women interested in being surrogates who were not interested in signing up with an agency.
Right.
Like, because those Facebook groups are,
Some of them are agency friendly in the sense that like agencies can be on there and they can advertise their
but they're not
services.
signed with an agency.
Some of the people on these Facebook groups are signed with
Oh, okay.
agencies, but they might not necessarily, and I don't know like the legality of it or like the exclusivity of it. It's probably different per agency and per agreement, but like if uh somebody is signed with a surrogacy agency, they might also be open to working independently, and it just depends on
Mm.
the parents they want to work with or the intended parents.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like starting to look online. I mean, we made our Instagram post and whatever, and I thought, okay, maybe there's somebody out there who will see it and then potentially reach out. And I felt like for a long time I was just kind of like sitting and waiting for somebody to message in, but it wasn't until recently that I started going on to Facebook and getting into different surrogacy groups and posting myself and putting out a picture and saying this is who we are. This is a little bit about us and we want to be parents and this is kind of like how the process has gone so far and we have embryos and we're ready. And that's when I really started getting connected with people and having conversations about,
Mm-hmm.
potentially continuing onward to surrogacy. And I feel like we've made way more headway just in the last few weeks than we've made in the last year and a half on
Yeah.
finding a surrogate.
Yeah. And then even going through that process and talking to people, messaging people, setting up like a call, it's like, oh my God, like this is a lot of pressure. You know what I mean? Like trying to find the right person
Well, it's a big
and
deal, but
it is
like
a big deal.
when it comes down to it, we're the ones making the decision and we're making the best
Mm-hmm.
decision we can for us and for our future family. So like it's up to us. I don't I felt like, putting a bunch of money towards an agency would kind of like lift responsibility off of myself and allow us more breathing room or whatever in order to like continue through the surrogacy process or like put us in the best case scenario. But when it comes down to it, like we're still responsible for every step of this process and we
Right.
have to see it through. So I don't know. I got tired of waiting
It is
and
that's the hard part, I think, is getting your embryos and then waiting a year and a half and not really like hearing much about any potential surrogate or like where you're at in line or like I don't know.
right,
It's just
yeah.
kind of hard to not do anything. So it's like we just
So I'm
are
like,
feeling compelled.
just let's get it going.
Like
Let's start
I
posting. Let's
guess we're
find
gonna try
people.
and do this, on our own or at least help speed the process up.
The one aside to this is that when you open yourself up to finding your own surrogate independently or just on your own, um, you are kind of like exposing yourself to all the good and the bad of the world. So you can be a little bit more vulnerable to having some unpleasant situations come up. Um, and I mean, like, we had a great interview with one surrogate,
Mm-hmm.
with one potential surrogate who was amazing. And like, we could
Very much
potentially,
a potential.
yep, we can
But it was
continue
like
on
our
that road.
first.
That was our first interview.
So it's like get a few under our belt maybe before we just like jump in, right?
And then, like, I spent a long time conversing with another potential surrogate online, just back and forth communication, messaging back and forth. And then I set up an appointment for an interview. It was a no-show. So there's just like some maybe wasted time or a lesson learned there. But those things happen too. And a potential surrogate could be a no-show for I don't know, anybody could be a no-show on it. But like we've heard horror stories of surrogates not showing up for something or pulling out at the last second.
Mm-hmm.
You go through all the legal process and the medical process, etc., and then it's like, okay, it's time for the transfer, and then they pull out. And like, fair enough, it's their body, their decision. They get to choose. That's okay. Sometimes we make a decision and then we go back on that decision, and that happens. It's just a lot of emotional investment, time, and financial investment to put into it to then kind of be let down last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're vulnerable to that no matter if you're with an agency or you're with, or you're going independent or
Right.
looking for someone yourself.
I don't know. So we're still looking for a surrogate. If anybody's interested,
Here's our advertisement. Yeah.
Here's our advertisement. Yes, leave a rating and review, and also message us if you want to be a surrogate and you have a uterus.
This podcast was brought to you by Michael and Matt and their search for a surrogate.
Do you want to have a baby but don't want to raise them?
Well, call us up.
Look no further.
We are ready for you.
Okay. Well, this has been great. We've not like dove into the deep into that IVF experience and exactly where we're at. That was definitely like the biggest emotional hurdle thus far, at least for me,
100%.
for sure.
Still kind of dealing with it.
Oh, totally.
It's fresh.
It's totally, yeah. And it's almost one of those things. It's like if that embryo is not going to work, I just want to know now. Like I want it. I want to have a transfer. I want to know if it took. And then if not, then I want to be able to like just like have that answer, But
that
anyway,
being said, like we do feel fortunate that we have the embryos that we have. Like that's
Yeah.
amazing.
and you can definitely end up with none or one or two, and we have 5, and like that's great.
It just there's so many things that we can't control, and we're just going to continue forward and hope for the freaking best. But I think one thing that I've learned in the last year and a half is that we have a lot more control over this than or not control. We have a lot more ability to like participate.
We have a lot more ability
in
to
this.
influence, potentially influence the process, or at least the speed at which the process happens.
We can take responsibility. We can
Well,
like
I mean,
we can put the responsibility on ourselves and see it through. That's what I mean. Like, I don't know. I just felt so far removed from it at the beginning of it and thought it was something that happens far away, something that we are just going to be getting updates on and providing input on, etc. But now I
it
feel
feels more
like
personal.
we're putting our hands in it. We're getting our hands dirty, and we're going to be working through it. We're going to be.
We're gonna deliver that baby ourselves.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No, we're not going to do that. But with that being said, it's like you start somewhere and then you get somewhere completely different, just like this podcast. We started somewhere. We didn't know where we're going. We thought we knew where we were going, and then we ended up somewhere completely different.
Well, I think that's all we have for today.
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna wrap it there.
I feel good.
Thanks for listening to our story and just kind of the ups and downs and constant thoughts that are going through our head of like, are we doing the right thing? Did we do this in the right spot? Like, did we use the right clinic? Are we pursuing this in the best way possible?
I'm gonna normalize. Can we normalize this? Just bring familiarity to the fact that a lot of us don't know what we're doing and we're trying our best, and it's okay to feel uncertain about the way that you're pursuing this.
Mhm.
And it's okay to learn and to change
Mhm.
your minds on things, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I don't
We're
think
all
you're ever
learning.
going to go through this process and think like, oh my gosh,
I did everything
I'm so
perfectly.
excited about everything I did, and I did everything perfectly, and nothing could have gone better. Maybe that's the case for some people. I just think that that's very rare.
So if you're feeling that, if you're feeling the pressure, the uncertainty, I am right there with you.
Mhm.
And seriously, like send us a message. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you on what you've experienced with non-traditional paths to parenthood, whether you've gone through the process, whether you're currently going through it, or you're just thinking about it, or I don't know, not even interested in it, and you're just here to have a good time.
Well, with that said, again, thanks for listening. Leave us a rating and a review. And until next time,
Daddy's out.